Have you ever tried to understand how an economy works, but just found the task too daunting? What makes an economy grow? How are wealth and jobs created? Well, I've come up with a very simple example that should help illustrate the basic mechanics of a functioning economy. Let's go back in time to a very rudimentary society, back before Adam Smith, the father of modern economic principles, back even before the introduction of money, to an imaginary kingdom called Littleville. In this kingdom there lived a man named Farmer Brown. Like everyone else, Farmer Brown required food in order to survive, so he made his living as a farmer. For the Bible says of man, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food." So, Farmer Brown worked the fields in order to grow his food. Every year he planted his crops in the spring and harvested them in the fall. Because of the amount of work involved, he was only able to grow enough food to feed himself and his family. Farmer Brown repeated this process year after year after year. Then one day his neighbor, Blacksmith Johnson, was struck with an idea while watching Farmer Brown toil in the fields. What if there was a way for Farmer Brown to plant more crops and grow more food? He immediately went to work and invented a device he called the plow. With the plow, Farmer Brown was able to sow 10 times as many crops. Instead of harvesting 10 bushels of wheat, he was now able to harvest 100 bushels. Farmer Brown was so impressed, he exchanged 10 bushels of his wheat for the plow. Blacksmith Johnson agreed to the exchange because it allowed him to feed his family without growing the food himself. What you have just witnessed is an example of wealth creation. Farmer Brown was able to make his profession 10 times more productive. Instead of 10 bushels of wheat, he was able to produce 100 bushels for the same amount of work, thanks to the help of a simple tool. Not only is the expansion of crops wealth creation, but the manufacture of the plow is also an example of wealth creation. An instrument of value which serves a useful purpose. And finally, it is also an example of job creation. Whereas once Blacksmith Johnson was responsible for feeding himself, he could now build plows for a living and exchange them with other farmers for wheat. But that's not the end of our story. For Littleville was ruled by a monarch, King Constant. And when King Constant learned that Farmer Brown had expanded his crops tenfold, he came and paid Farmer Brown a visit. He saw all the wheat that Farmer Brown had accumulated and was very impressed. So impressed that he decided to take 10 bushels for himself. He called it a tax and a contribution to the monarchy. And so from that day forth, Farmer Brown was required to give 10% of his crops to King Constant to support the monarchy. Now, regardless of what King Constant used the wheat for, the fact is, his action contracted the kingdom's economy by a small amount. In Farmer Brown's case, by 10%. Whereas he was producing 100 bushels of wheat, he was required to give 10 bushels to the government. Recall he also gave 10 bushels to Blacksmith Johnson, but he got a plow in exchange. So the 10 bushels that went to Blacksmith Johnson contributed to wealth creation, in this case, the construction of a plow. The 10 bushels that went to King Constant did not. They were simply taken and consumed by the government. For the government cannot create wealth, it can only confiscate it. And once it's confiscated wealth, it can do one of 3 things with it: consume it, destroy it, or redistribute it. That's it. Whether it's 10 bushels of wheat or $787 billion of stimulus.